And welcome back.
And welcome back. As promised before the break, we have been joined by Steve Duncan, who is the manager of the Heritage Bank. And we're going to be talking about the acquisition of the First Caribbean International Bank and the transition process as it unfolds. Good morning, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Now, Steve, let's talk a little bit about the process. And of course, this has been something that has been in the media for quite some time.
True.
But obviously, the acquisition of a bank is not an easy process.
Yes.
So let's start actually by talking about how this entire process began and where we are now.
The acquisition of the bank, you're right, is not an easy process, but I think even more difficult would be the winding up of a bank. It's very difficult to shut down a bank. When apparently First Caribbean decided that they wanted to withdraw from the market, they then went through the process of trying to identify a suitable buyer. It would take them years to wind up a bank, so it's always easier to sell and to have somebody else continue the operations. So they went through a bidding process where banks in Belize bid to purchase. And we were successful. That took a while. That process of itself took a little while for them to go through to see if they would indeed find someone who would be interested in purchasing their business. So that was of itself took some time for us. After we were identified as a successful bidder, you then had even more fundamental stuff to work through, all right, including things like approvals from the various regulatory bodies and that type of thing, which again took a while. And the announcement was made last year. And since then, we've been trying to work through to get to this point of actually doing the transition. So between then and now, there have been a series of things that we've been doing to get to this point in the background. We are only able to become as public as I'm doing now because we've passed certain critical stages. Prior to that, it was very difficult for either bank to come out and speak publicly because we had milestones you had to pass, things that had to be done prior to doing so. We feel that we're at that point now and we're able to come out and speak publicly to give people assurance of what is happening, that type of thing. What we've done is we're not buying the company as some people would have suggested in the media. Really, First Caribbean International Bank Barbados Limited will continue to exist. It's an entity that continues to exist. All that is happening is the Belize portion of its assets, etc., it's selling, but it continues to exist in the rest of the Caribbean region. So just the assets we are buying, primarily or specifically, customers' accounts that we're taking over. And that is basically, and the buildings, the properties that they own in Belize, equipment, buildings, real estate, that type of thing. So that's basically it, to be honest with you.
What are we talking about in terms of assets that they do have?
Their assets would be in excess of around 200 plus million Belize dollars. From the perspective of Heritage Bank, it is, from the preliminary calculations we've done, it is actually intended to, it's likely going to double our balance sheet. So, which for us clearly is something that we are excited about.
Now, that's one of the things that I wanted to be able to address. Obviously, Heritage Bank being the youngest bank, local bank in Belize.
Other than a national bank.
Yes, yes, true. This growth,
Yes.
one of the issues obviously is looking at your capacity to be able to handle
Yes.
the assets that you're now taking on. What have you been doing internally to ensure that you will be able to meet
Yes.
the number of clients and the amount of interactions you'll have now?
Yeah, good question. It's always very challenging to grow within the market. You have bigger banks that are well established and are well entrenched within the system, and it's not very easy to grow. Now, we have been growing, but at a slow pace. This acquisition presents an opportunity for us to experience a level of growth that would have taken us years to experience otherwise. So what it did, it has caused us or forced us to bring forward certain capital expenditure that we maybe were thinking about, but you didn't have to do immediately. But now we have to do that. For instance, one of the main things we've done is to enter into a contract with Dell, the computer giant out of the US, to provide support for us. And we've had to change out our systems where we have purchased, set up new system, greater capacity, etc., from Cisco out of the US as well. So that for us was the key thing, to be able to ensure that our systems can handle the load. And we have done that. We've tested them. In fact, we put them in ahead of time, so they're actually functional today, even before we transition the accounts. And we have a support agreement signed with Dell to make sure that we can have that level of support. One of the other things we want to do is we recognize during a transition of this nature, there will be a lot of questions. Don't mind how much we get out to the public, etc. I don't think we will ever be able to answer all the questions out there. And on the date of the transition, or even after the transition, there will still be questions. What we're doing is we've decided to put in place something that we didn't have in our system before, and that is to set up a call center. So we're going to set up a call center in our building on Barrack Road, and we're putting it together now to be able to field all the questions possible, to be able to answer all the possible likely questions. Now, we do recognize that the bulk of the questions will naturally come from the customers of First Caribbean and not necessarily the customers of Heritage Bank. So what we've done is we've actually gone one step further, and we are employing one of the senior persons from First Caribbean to run that call center for us, to give that level of comfort and that level of knowledge of their business and their customers. So that is one of the things we want to set up, and the goal, we want to have it set up even before the transition date. So we are working on that now to try to have it set up sometime by the middle of this month so that it's up and running. We're going to place all our lines into that call center from across the country into that one site, and they'll have the ability to transfer calls, move calls, answer questions, that type of thing. So that's one of the things we're doing immediately.
One of the questions that springs immediately to mind for me has to do with the fact that people, especially when you're talking about banking,
Yes.
Deals with a reputation.
Yes.
And the transfer from First Caribbean
Yes.
to Heritage for some people. How do you allay the fears that there is stability for people who may have chosen First Caribbean based on the fact that it is a well-established bank?
Yeah, I think that is likely to be one of the biggest hurdles, which is, you'll appreciate, a psychological situation that comes through, I would think, not just with the customers, but even with staff. You choose a bank for a specific reason, you choose a job for a specific reason, and then when you have to move on. Now, I think the easy answer would be that this decision was made for them because it was not made by the customers nor the staff. It was made for them by First Caribbean. And so I believe where we come in as Heritage Bank is more to pick up the slack. All right? So our thing is, we have been around for 15, this is our anniversary month, by the way, January. It was about 15 years ago that Glenn Godfrey and his team started then Alliance Bank, was it? Yes, Alliance Bank. So I think we've come a long way, 15 years. But clearly not in the league of the other banks who have been around 40 plus years, 50 plus years, 100 plus years, you know. But
with your new portfolio, you're...
well, we are hoping to get there. And as the old saying goes, the journey of 1,000 miles starts but with the first step. You have to start somewhere. And doing 15 steps, as it were, says that actually these people are serious. Making an investment like this to purchase the assets of this suggests that the bank is serious and we are thinking longevity. All right? What do we bring to the table, though, in all of this discussion is at the end of the day, we are a local bank focused on Belize. We are interested in Belize. We are interested in all aspects of Belizean life and want to do things that we believe will enhance the Belizean experience. So it is not as though we have, as I say, serve two masters. You can't serve two masters at the same time. First, it's just about Belize, because all our investment is in Belize, right? We are hoping to ensure that we can fill that gap. We do not believe we will be able to fill the gap fully. That will be left by First Caribbean. We are not First Caribbean. We don't expect to be First Caribbean. We don't want to be First Caribbean. We have our own culture, our own style, our own approach to things. And there are things that maybe First Caribbean did not do that we might be able to do.
Can I jump in there, because I think that's a very key element. You're talking about, for the clients especially, moving from a regional bank to a national bank. Correct. And there will be differences in terms of cultural banking practices.
That's correct.
What are some that you can educate your customers about ahead of time that perhaps will either be an opportunity for them or perhaps a bit of a challenge?
Yeah. Opportunity-wise, you're talking decisions being made locally, where people who have come up in this environment would be able to make decisions influenced by the very same environment. As you know, I worked with Barclays and then First Caribbean for a total of 31 years prior to moving on to Heritage Bank. And we, back then, and I suspect it's no different now, but back then we were always faced with the situation that the policies used to be a kind of one size fits all. So a policy that was put in place in a certain location had to be spread out across the region. We were then asked to fit into it. The policy was not developed to suit you. You had to try to slim down to fit into that. I think it is slightly different now under the local banks, and we see it with all the local banks in Belize. You try to implement and develop policies that are consistent with the environment where you work. And I think that of itself is going to be a huge opportunity. One of the challenges, though, just to finish with, is clearly the global reach. And I feel what is going to help us with this is that we should not look at Belize in a context of an individual bank. But if we look at Belize in the context of the total financial space, I believe that within Belize you can have just about everything from a financial solution context, right? And what is not available, for instance, at Heritage Bank will certainly be available within the country, so that the departure of First Caribbean is not going to impact the country to the extent that you cannot get this or you cannot get that. What it means is that it may bring a greater definition of what used to happen within the system in the first place, meaning a lot of people in Belize are already multi-banked. So you have an account at this institution, you have an account at another institution, you have an account at Whole Redeemer Credit Union, you have an account at Atlantic Bank or Heritage. It happens a lot. I suspect that people will begin to look at that even more now to say, well, okay, if I cannot get this here, but I can get it elsewhere, well, you know, I find my solution. And I think the departure of First Caribbean is going to probably accentuate that type of approach a little more.
And given the fact that you have all the new guidelines internationally for banking that all banks must subscribe to,
yes.
I don't know if it's
laundering.
Yeah.
Well, that everybody has to subscribe to, period. Yeah. Don't matter what your name is. Because at the end of the day, the individual bank's performance impacts the country overall. So the regulators will not allow you to get away with that. You have to fall into line. So Heritage Bank has always practiced the very same thing that First Caribbean or any other bank in Belize has practiced, because that is a requisition, that is a requirement of the regulators and the international community. In fact, the international community will not deal with you if you don't meet those guidelines, and it is for that reason we are able to still deal and have access to the international community. All right? If not, we'd be in greater trouble. As you know, recently we've had this issue of, in particular, Bank of America and some of the other larger banks, the correspondent banking relationships. Now, clearly it is still a concern and it is still a challenge we are working through. But the banks still deal with us, and I don't know if the public understands the issue very well, but really what happens, there are different types of accounts, there are different types of banking, and within the correspondent banking realm, you have the operating account, where it's like if you have your checking account, all right, and then you have a term deposit, and the bank will say to you, well, I don't want to do that checking account, but I'll keep your term deposit, all right, or I'll keep your shares, but I don't want to do checking account. And basically that is what has happened to us. It's not that they have cut relationship with us completely. So if the situation, or if the bank did not meet the standards that were required, they wouldn't have wanted to do business with us at all. But really what they've done is they've said, well, okay, we'll keep this. They cherry pick, so to speak, right? And then the operating account they don't want to do. So you're looking around for an operating account, and in the meantime, what you have to do, you end up using service providers and other institutions that can help you to do those same types of services, all right? Except that you're not doing it directly with a bank until you can sort out that part of it. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Now, this obviously has been a part of the challenge in terms of the financial sector. And yes. In terms of, I hear what you're saying in terms of the broader picture, yes. But can we pin it down to Heritage Bank itself and what you do to maintain and to ensure that your clients will be able to access the services Correct. That come with having a correspondent bank?
Correct. We have an agreement with service providers, yeah. And right now we are dealing with a service provider out of New Zealand that sends our wires and receives our wires for us. We are now negotiating with a second service provider out of the US to do a similar thing. Mm-hmm. And in fact, just on my way here, I got a message from a third in the UK who's arranging a similar thing for us. So in the old days when we had Bank of America was able to just go everywhere and be everywhere. I think we kind of became too contented, and we took certain things for granted. Now what we have to do is to build different relationships in different parts of the world, and that's what we're doing to make sure. So far, the service provider out of New Zealand has been very good to us, and it's been working, mm-hmm. and we've not had any problems with it. In fact, it gave us a slight advantage because they're almost a whole day ahead of us. They're something like about 20 hours ahead of Belize. So when I send my wires out today, Monday, it's already Tuesday for them. So when they send it Tuesday, we not get a Tuesday yet. So by the time we get the Tuesday, the wire is already in your account, the payment is already in your account. So in fact, even with the others I bill, I'm thinking about holding on to that one because of that advantage it gives us, because they're so far ahead of us in terms of their work day, you know? Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Because when you're talking about, we've seen this globally in terms of the terminology, and I want perhaps a kind of definition of what happens here, whether it's an acquisition, whether it's a merger, and what that really means.
Yes.
Because in some cases, you have, I think, forced to march kind of mergers and all of that. But what would you term it? And sorry, how would you define it? And what does it really mean in terms of acquiring the assets of First Caribbean for Heritage Bank?
Well, your last statement is, I would say, the most accurate of all. Acquiring the assets of the First Caribbean operations in Belize. It is not an acquisition in the international sense that we are acquiring First Caribbean. It is not a merger in the international sense that we are merging with First Caribbean. We are doing neither. Acquisition, in its pure sense, tend to talk in terms of acquiring the shares of an entity. That's not what we're doing. So we will never change our name to First Caribbean. The First Caribbean name will continue to exist by its current shareholders. Nothing to do with us. It is like you having a home and you decide to sell your washing machine. You're not selling your home, but you're selling the asset out of the house. And so I can go and buy a washing machine without buying William's house. Basically, I am buying the accounts, the Belize accounts, out of First Caribbean. They have other accounts in there. They have Barbados accounts, they have Grenada accounts, they have St. Kitts accounts. We are not buying those.
And I ask that question because we see being played out as well some staffing issues.
Yes.
So in clarifying that,
yes,
how do you handle those in terms of the acquisition? Does staff come over?
Yes.
Do you have to deal with the collective bargaining agreement that is still there?
Yeah.
How is that maneuvered? Yeah,
that would cause me to lose the rest, a little I have, not the less, a little hair that I have left. No, the labor contract was not, the employment contract is not part of the transaction. It is all accounts, the customer's accounts, all right? The labor contract is not part of it. First Caribbean has to do its, whatever its obligation is to its staff and pay them out. All that is required to terminate an employment contract. And that they will do, all right? So that does not form part of what we're doing. In fact, I'm not even privy. What I see on TV and what I see on news is what I tend to learn, because those correspondents, we are now in the process of employing staff.
Well,
and in fact, we have to go through the whole motions of talking with them, interviewing them, asking them questions, because First Caribbean doesn't even want to share the staff files with us, because they say, but you are not buying these. So we don't have anything on the people. So when they come for their interview, we have to ask them right down to what, and their date of birth, and their middle name, and all kinds of things, because we don't know anything about them, right? Now, clearly, I have worked with, been there, I was there, I led a lot of them. So I have a fair idea of some of the, but then I am not in charge of that area. I have an HR director. And so they have to go through the whole motions of getting, collecting all this information over and that type of thing. So I really don't know.
Is there a target or a known number of or percentage of staff that will be retained or that will move over to Heritage?
We have just issued offer letters to staff, and they are to come back to us during the course of this week to tell us if in fact they will accept the job or not. So in terms of that, I will say not yet, because I don't know who will take up and not take up. All right. What I can say to you is in terms of jobs, if you look in terms of the broad numbers. First Caribbean, my vague recollection is somewhere over 60 employees. I don't remember the exact figure. And I can say to you, I think it's somewhere around 65, 64, 65. And I can say to you that in terms of applications coming from First Caribbean to us, it was somewhere around 40. Okay. All right, so not everybody applied. Now, for us, it is important that we have some, because we would want the institutional knowledge, we would want the continuity. They know a lot of the customers. The
client relationship.
Absolutely. So for us, that is good. And so we want some of that, definitely. However, from our standpoint, we will go to the market to pick up the slack in terms of what we do not get from First Caribbean, because we want more. You have to recall that today, First Caribbean does not do everything in Belize. First Caribbean has a lot of things centralized in other Caribbean countries, including call centers. And a lot of work is done out there. When I was at First Caribbean, the number of staff was closer to 100. They're down to 60 odd now. That of itself says that a lot of jobs left Belize slowly over the years. We have no choice but to put them back in to some degree, because we do not have a head office somewhere outside of Belize. Yeah. So effectively, as we sit here today, we believe that we will need somewhere around 50 new people. Whatever we do not get from First Caribbean, we will get from the market. So there will be jobs. It just may not be all First Caribbean employees. But we believe that we will need somewhere around 50.
And as you pointed out, about 75% actually applied.
Yeah, of First Caribbean, yes.
And you said you had mentioned previously that you have kept some key personnel to be able to maintain relationship, as you pointed out.
From First Caribbean?
Yeah, from First Caribbean.
Well, I do wait for the sign up and get that.
Well, you said the call center person is a previous employee.
I hope he sign up. That's what I say, I don't want to get, but we've made offers, yes. And that is my plan, to have a First Caribbean employee.
Now, Heritage Bank's acquisition has definitely been clouded with this issue. As you see, we have
with
the issue with the I'm talking about the footage that's rolling, the discontent of the employees of FCIB, and how they have been unable to reach an agreement when it comes to their collective bargaining agreement and exit packages. What do you do to be able to shift the conversation? Because as you pointed out, if we had a First Caribbean International Bank representative, we could ask them more about what is happening with the employees. But that is not part of the portfolio that you've purchased.
Correct.
So what do you do now as to shift the conversation and the focus so that clients who are watching this and saying, well, I don't know if I want to do business with a company that treats their employees like that, not being able to distinguish the difference?
The people that we... firstly, I'm hoping that there will be a settlement to all this. And I know that First Caribbean is working towards that. And as someone who had been in the system, like I said, for 31 years, I know that First Caribbean has not come out to really talk about what it is doing or what it has done or not done. And so far we've heard primarily from the side of the employees. So, as they say in everything, there are always two sides, sometimes three sides to every story. And as someone who worked there for years, and who, in fact, I was the person who negotiated the first collective bargaining agreement before I left. It was signed off after I left, but I did the negotiations. I am still trying to understand what is it that First Caribbean has not done or done at this level. So I have kind of stayed out of it because I'm still trying to listen and understand, and because I'm not privy to all the discussions, all the correspondences, I am not entirely sure. All right. So I don't want to take that as a blanket thing to say, well, okay, that is a bad employer, because for all the years that I worked with them, they were a good employer to me. And through the organization, I have been able to accomplish a lot. In fact, were it not for the organization, I probably would not be able to do what I'm doing today, because the capacity and the skills that I developed from that organization is very, very invaluable. And I do not want, so I don't want to jump on that bandwagon to suggest that First Caribbean is a bad employer. In fact, I know that as part of our agreement, one of the clauses and one of the things we said was that everything within the collective bargaining agreement must be respected. And they signed to that with me. So while I was not privy to the conversation, we went to pains to make sure that people would be treated properly. Now, if the request from the staff goes beyond the collective bargaining agreement, I don't know and I cannot speak to that. But I can say that within the terms of the collective bargaining agreement and what was in there at the time, the First Caribbean committed to us that they would certainly make sure that those requirements are respected. All right? In fact, as recently as last week, they committed to me that the collective bargaining agreement is going to be respected. And I'm hoping that that plays out, because like I said, a lot of the people I worked with and that type of thing for years. So it's not to try to disadvantage them at all right? And so I want to make sure that it is settled. I gather that in fact it might have been settled on Friday. I know they were having meetings on Friday, and I'm hoping that it was settled. All right.
Now we're 3 weeks before the final transfer. What is the most Yeah.
Go ahead.
What is the course of action at this point in time?
Yeah. I think it is important for the customers of First Caribbean, and in fact for all customers, Heritage Bank customers, to know which offices we will retain, where we will be located, etc. First Caribbean has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 offices. 2 in Belize City, 1 in Belmopan, 1 in Dangriga, 1 in Orange Walk. We are already located in all those areas, so there are some overlaps. What we want to do is to rationalize the offices. In Belize City, today we are the only bank without an office downtown. So we will keep the Albert Street office open. It gives us that downtown presence. So that is very good for us. Because of our existing location on Princess Margaret Drive by the hospital, we do not think we need to keep the one in Sancas Plaza open. And so we are not taking that on. That is a lease premises for First Caribbean, and so they will terminate the lease at some point. So, but that will not continue. All right? In Belmopan, the property in Belmopan is owned by First Caribbean. Heritage Bank is renting in Belmopan. So it only stands to reason that we will relocate to the building that is owned by First Caribbean. So in that case, in Belmopan, First Caribbean customers will be on familiar grounds because we will move into First Caribbean's building, all right? All customers will have to make the adjustment in that case, all right? And I hope they can. In the case of Dangriga, both of us own premises in Dangriga. We only just built about a year ago, so we want to stay in those premises. And so we intend to close the First Caribbean branch in Dangriga, and we will use ours. In Orange Walk, today we are both in leased premises, rented premises. However, we are building in our own property in Orange Walk, but it is not yet complete. It's going to be completed somewhere around June.
Okay.
So in the interim, we will be moving into First Caribbean's building, their property, which is more central compared to where we are today. So we will move, and then 6 months later, whenever our building is finished, we will move into that as our permanent place of abode. Okay. All right? All this has to happen in one weekend. All we have is a weekend. The contract from First Caribbean says that when they close on the Friday, when we open on the Monday, it must be Heritage Bank, and there must be no sign saying First Caribbean. So I have to take down everything. I have to move everybody. I have to do all that needs to be done. We have to configure the ATMs. We have to configure point of sale terminals. We have to change a lot of things. Effectively, we will not be sleeping that weekend.
Over the weekend of the 30th and 31st.
That is correct. The 29th, I think, is the Friday.
Yes.
The 29th is the Friday. So when they close on the Friday, and I know First Caribbean has written to the regulators to ask for an early closure because it's going to be very tight. Mm-hmm. We have to do things like checking cash, taking over vaults, taking over a set of things. All right? Mm-hmm. So all weekend we will be working, and the plan is that on Monday morning when we open, it says Heritage Bank, and you're able to access your accounts.
Accounts will be accessible, ATM cards will be usable, point of sale machines will be up and running come February 1st.
That is the plan. How do we get there? We have mailed out credit cards and debit cards already.
Okay.
That happened last week. If there is any lingering card or so, that will be done latest this week. But last week we started. So that should be in the hands of people, or we hope to get in the hands of people shortly. So we want to have those ready, all right? Up and running, activated as far as is possible. And we are hoping that if anybody out there does not receive a card during the course of this week, to please call us.
If someone had an account with both banks, they now have two accounts at Heritage?
For the first, the answer is yes, and I'll tell you why. Again, we only have 1 weekend to do all this, Marlene. We do not have time to say, go through and try to get you to combine this and combine that. We are going to automate the transition process and bring across all the accounts, put it into our base, and they're up and running. After that, we can rationalize. For instance, me, I have a credit card at First Caribbean, and just Friday, I got my letter saying that this is your new credit card. No, I already have a credit card at Heritage Bank. But we don't have time to sanitize that at the moment. The only sanity check we have done is to make sure that the accounts that are coming across will not duplicate an account number that we already have. And so we have been, as one of the checks we were doing to compare the two databases, and we were doing that behind the scenes, and I'm pleased to say that only 2 accounts were duplicated.
Now, we have to wrap this segment, but I have one final quick question I'd like your response to, because customers and a transfer of customers, obviously, whether you had a mortgage with First Caribbean or some other agreement, there is a contract that was signed between the two parties. How, with the acquisition of the assets, how will that be handled, and can people expect that the same conditions, etc., will stand in place?
Yeah, there are 2 aspects to that. Firstly, again, it's just a weekend. We really do not have time to stop and check no letter. Can I squeeze William a little more on this? Can I think? We are bringing things across because because it's going to be done electronically. It'll just be to pick up what is there and embed it in and put it in our system as is. So nothing can change over that period of time. Absolutely, we don't have the time, just by the sheer time. However, from an intent standpoint, it is not the intention to change anything, because we want to respect that. But more than just respecting the contract, we want to keep the customers. So it is not our intention to change anything on you to annoy you so that you leave and go anywhere else. We are doing this acquisition. It's a huge investment for our bank. We want to get the benefits of it. So we are not going to do anything to drive away anybody. We want to keep the customers. And finally, though, having said that, at the end of the day, things do change from time to time. So sometime down the road, when we change for our own customers, we may need to change for you, but it's not because of the transition. Okay. You understand me? For the transition, we will keep everything as best as possible intact. We have to work for speed and accuracy for that weekend. We don't got time for try squeeze more out of anybody. On the flip side, though, I've already had calls where people say, hold on this service, I know you cheaper than First Caribbean. Which one I want to get when I come across? So
right now, the standards that you have at First Caribbean are what you will continue to have until you get around to updating.
Okay. All right. So those who want the better pricing may also need to wait as well.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for joining us and for sharing the information as to how the transfer will occur. We know you have a lot of work coming up, and of course, there are lots of questions from customers as well. So we appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just to the general public, I ask you to please bear with us and take time. There will be teething problems, but please bear with us. Thank you.
Right. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, it's for a conversation with economist and financial expert to talk about understanding the economy. So stay tuned.